Thank you for downloading this Brum Radio podcast. For more podcasts, visit brumradio.com.
And now, for your listening pleasure, it's the Brum Picture Show, brought to you by Brum Radio.
Now it's dark. Hello and welcome to what is sure to be the most sincere episode ever of the Brum Picture Show, the film show brought to you by Birmingham-based community cinema collective Screen B14. Now, originally for this episode, we were going to do werewolves to tie in with the release of The Wolfman, but then something happened that made such a topic seem frivolous. David Lynch passed away at the age of 78. Now, in some tenuous ways, this does tie in with our original theme of werewolves, as in 2010, David Lynch famously tweeted, "This weekend, I'm going to try to find out if I'm connected to the moon." He followed this up a few days later with the tweet, "I'm pretty sure I'm connected to the moon." And in a way, that sums up the man. He lived on a different plane of existence to all of us. He was more than just the director of classic films such as Eraserhead, Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive. He was a philosopher, in a way, and a force for good in the world. So today, instead of following our usual formula, we're going to be dedicating the whole show to paying tribute to not only my favourite director, but frankly, my favourite person. Apologies to my parents and my friends, and to you, Nadine. So joining me today is Screen B14's very own filmmaking genius, and also someone who loves birds like David Lynch, because David Lynch once tweeted, "Dear Twitter friends, I like to watch and count birds in the morning. I've made friends with a hummingbird." So how's it going, Nadine? Welcome.
It's going good, all things considered. I'm pretty sure I'm connected to the moon as well.
That's good. I thought so as well.
Yeah. I definitely. I know that sounds like a joke.
No.
But I do really like the moon. So that is something. When I saw that quote, I was like, yeah, I agree.
We're all connected to the moon. And you also befriend birds, don't you? Or you attempt to.
All sorts of creatures.
Yeah, but particularly crows you're trying to befriend, aren't you, by creating some kind of bartering system with them?
Yeah, I'm trying to create a barter relationship with the crows in my back garden. So far, they've got a lot of food off me and haven't given me anything in return. So I'm a bit disappointed with that, but I'm going to keep trying.
I'm sure they're building up to something special.
Yeah, something shiny, gift. Hopefully.
There you go. Well, thanks for joining me, Nadine, at this sad time. So yes, I just want to start by saying just how much the death of David Lynch has affected me. So the way in which I found out about David Lynch passing away was quite appropriate. So at the time, I was on a long walk along the canal to Dudley, of all places, a route that took me through some brutal industrial landscapes.
He'd have loved that.
Yeah, he would have loved that. And yeah, a lot of it, I was thinking, this is not unlike Eraserhead. And then I saw the message on my phone and my heart sank. David Lynch had a defining role in shaping my tastes and, you know, my personality in lots of ways, and most importantly, friendships. I've had so many friendships that have been forged over a love of David Lynch. And he's always helped me find my people. And in fact, David Lynch himself says Twin Peaks people are party people. And yeah, the man was just a legend, full of contradictions. So he was a deeply spiritual man who even, you know, founded a transcendental meditation charity. Yeah, he was a man who smoked heavily. He ate at Bob's Big Boy Burgers every day for about 7 years. And he found no greater pleasure in life than having 2 cookies and a Coke. Yeah. It's a beautiful soul. And he's also one of the few directors to become an adjective, and perhaps the only one to become an adjective that can be used to describe real life experiences, because nothing has ever happened to me that made me say, well, that was quite Hitchcockian. But I have encountered many things in life that I would describe as Lynchian.
Well, maybe that's because you haven't been accused of a crime you didn't commit.
Yeah.
I think if that happened, all the crimes you've been accused of are ones you have committed.
That's true.
So, when you're accused of one you haven't committed, that would be very Hitchcockian.
That's true. I'll be eating my words when that happens. But anyway, so yeah, but to me, this is just like a genuine tragedy in so many ways. I feel a great sadness about all the projects that never happened due to COVID, his health problems, and idiotic executives. We could have had so much more. I mean, look at Clint Eastwood still going at 94. But we must be eternally grateful for what he left behind. Because many thought that Inland Empire would be it. And then by some miracle, we wound up with Twin Peaks: The Return, which is essentially an 18-hour-long film of David Lynch's unadulterated, uncompromised vision. And what a swan song. So yeah, genuinely been in mourning. So today's episode, we're going to be mixing things up, and it's going to be a David Lynch tribute episode. So Nadine, I believe we've had an email from our listener.
I love that singular.
Yeah.
So yes, we did have an email come through from Skip. It was the Brum Picture Show's own Paul Vernon who introduced me to the unique universe of David Lynch back in our late teens via watching the entirety of Twin Peaks in a matter of days. Years later, we would binge The Return along with hours of behind-the-scenes footage in a similar manner, and I would consume his entire oeuvre in between. His death strikes the same chords of loss as David Bowie did all those years ago. Another truly fearless artist following no trends or paths other than his own muse, a creative across multiple platforms, possessed of a disarming charisma and a chameleonic compulsion to never repeat, but rather to flit effortlessly between genres whilst maintaining a cohesiveness and strength of character that made his work instantly recognisable, that is to say, Lynchian. It's going to take a long time to process this, as I'm sure Paul will agree. I hope David found his golden sunshine and blue skies all the way.
Aww. It is on a par with Bowie in terms of just like the absolute outpouring of love and admiration. So I've never, to be honest, I don't think I've ever seen Twitter be such a nice place to be for that 24 hours. It was remarkable. I don't think my timeline was entirely David Lynch. Now, obviously,
Isn't that always your timeline?
Yeah, well, that is true. That is true. But it is like there literally wasn't anything else. Obviously, the algorithm's doing a lot of work there. But like, I couldn't believe it. I was just scrolling through Twitter and sobbing like on the night of his death because obviously, I was kind of numb when I found out. And then just going through all those tributes, I was just in absolute floods of tears, like reading some. And it was really nice to see Twitter be a really nice place for a day. Because often with people who pass away, there's lots of caveats of like, yes, but he did kill that kitten. And there's nothing like that with David Lynch. It was just all beautiful, beautiful tributes. So I believe, Nadine, you've seen some tributes on the old Twitter that caught your eye. Yeah,
well, I haven't seen them on Twitter. I've just seen them there's other corners of the internet as well.
No, it's Twitter.
But yes, it's called X now. Get over it, Paul.
No.
It's been 2 years.
No.
No, but here's just some tributes that I found. So this one's Carl McLachlan, who, if you don't know, starred in many of Lynch's movies, somewhat of a muse. Mm-hmm. And he called him Kale because Dino De Laurentiis couldn't pronounce his name and he called him Kale, the producer on Dune. Mm-hmm. 42 years ago, for reasons beyond my comprehension, David Lynch plucked me out of obscurity to star in his first and last big-budget movie. He clearly saw something in me that even I didn't recognise. I owe my entire career and life really to his vision. I will miss him more than the limits of my language can tell and my heart can bear. My world is that much fuller because I knew him and that much emptier now that he's gone. David, I remain forever changed and forever your Kale. Thank you for everything.
Yeah. Oh, bless that. They'd really had like the strongest relationship because, Carl McLachlan was plucked out of obscurity for Dune of all things. And
which was a massive flop.
Yeah.
And then he cast him again in Blue Velvet.
Yeah.
And then again in Twin Peaks. So obviously he did see something in Kyle or Kale that he felt was worth, that continued collaboration. He also had a nickname for Laura Dern. And so he cast her in Blue Velvet alongside Kale. Her nickname was Tidbit.
Yeah.
And worked with her on many occasions as well. So when he liked someone and he became friends with them, he said he could see things in them that maybe other people didn't see. Like he felt like Laura Dern could play anything. Like literally thought she was like one of the best actresses. And that's why he liked working with them again and again, was because he could see sides of them that other people didn't see because he was also their friend.
Yeah.
And Naomi Watts as well really felt seen by Lynch. She didn't feel like she was getting the work that she perhaps wanted to get or should have been getting, and he worked with her on Mulholland Drive. And like there's a fun little quote from the pair of them where he said, Naomi came in and did not look exactly like the photo I fell in love with. Yeah. And she said, yes, it was a little disappointing. And he says, it wasn't disappointing, it was devastating. But he still cast her in the film.
Yeah, still brought her back. Yeah, he had her come back all dressed up. And there's loads of directors that you'd be like, oh, you creep. But he just genuinely wanted to see both sides of the character. And it's also there's a lovely little meta element to Mulholland Drive and Naomi Watts' casting, because I believe Naomi Watts used to be Nicole Kidman's roommate, trying to make it big in Hollywood, and then Nicole Kidman went off and became this absolute star, and it took another decade or so for David Lynch really to kickstart Naomi Watts' career. So there's a strong relationship between Naomi Watts herself and her character in Mulholland Drive, and I just think that's fascinating. That's something that he kind of
just got from that photo.
Perhaps. So yeah,
but yeah, he's very. I think the interesting thing about David Lynch is, I was watching his David Lean lecture, which I'm sure I'll quote later on. There's some really great moments in that. But he was really motivated, I don't think by story or by message or any of those things, but by images, by ideas. He talked again and again. It was part of his meditative practice, was this idea of fishing for ideas. And so when people ask him to explain his films, it kind of was going against the point. The point was that there were these images and these feelings and these moods and these sounds, and that it was kind of open for you to interpret. So he was truly visual in that sense. And that perhaps came from his painterly background. I've heard that he got into filmmaking when he saw one of his paintings moved by the wind, and he thought, oh, that's interesting, and he wanted to see more of his images moving. So yeah, it's kind of, in that way it's interesting because we can talk about what does the film mean and so on, but that was kind of not really the point for him.
No, he always used to say the film is the talking. He's always moaning that you make a film and then people are asking you to explain it, and it's just like, no, the film exists, so there you go.
I do agree with him, because he said in the David Lean lecture, he said that you spend all this time trying to create this film in the beautiful language of cinema, and he really believed it to be a language. And then he says, and then people want you to translate it back into words. Yeah. And I totally get what he means, because I can be really frustrating sometimes. I'm a filmmaker myself, and probably the worst part is where you have to pitch your idea and you've got to sum it up and what's it about, what's it really about, and what's the story and what's the plot. And log lines I find really difficult. So log line, if you don't know, is when you have to sum up your whole entire idea in one sentence. And they say if you can't sum it up in a sentence, it's too complicated. But my feeling is if I can sum it up in a sentence, why would I spend 120 pages going on about it in a screenplay? So yeah, I do kind of get where he's coming from there.
Yeah, famously, I think... was it Janus or something like that? They'd asked David Lynch to write a summary, a synopsis of Inland Empire, and he refused to give them anything more than a woman in trouble. That was it. That's it.
That's a good title for a film. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah,
Sounds
yeah.
like a Pedro Almodovar film.
Una mujer in, I don't know what trouble is.
En una
Yeah.
situación difícil.
Yes. I like that. But yes, obviously there's millions and millions more tributes out there, and that's what I mean. It's just everyone. One in particular I liked was John Carpenter, because unfortunately David Lynch passed away on John Carpenter's birthday, which must have been pretty sad. But he said that he got to be friends with David Lynch when they were both at Universal years ago. He was a very kind man, and he was a fan of Bob's Big Boy. So was I, he says. I'm going to miss him. R.I.P. David. And that's that strange little quirk of David Lynch in it, for all of his, spirituality. Loved some fast food.
Loved his sugar.
Loved his sugar. Yeah, what do you call sugar? Granulated happiness.
As you said, you'd go to Bob's Big Boy every day for 7 years at 2:30, order a chocolate milkshake and a coffee, and write on napkins. He thought it was a great desk.
Yeah.
Because he always had paper.
Yeah.
It was just like...
It's true.
Do you not think he's a bit like an alien or something? That the way he describes things are like in no way anybody else you'd ever meet would describe something.
Exactly. In fact, that was one of the things. This wasn't from a celebrity. This was just like a random person on Twitter. He said his favourite Lynch story was from a friend of a friend who knew his son in college and was over at his house one time, and they were leaving to get lunch, and Lynch asked where they were going, and they said they were grabbing burritos, to which Lynch responded, "What's a burrito?" It's just like, yeah, an alien. And then he followed that up with saying, and if this sounds fake, I also met his son outside a pupusa stand one time and asked if this really happened. And before he could even finish the story, David Lynch's son was like, yeah, what's a burrito? What's a taco? That's him, all right. So, yeah, he's just...
He lived in his own world, this kind of weird 1950s Americana, twisted
exactly. And good for him. And also, your death means something when NASA is tweeting about you. And NASA tweeted with David Lynch's famous mantra, "Keep your eye on the donut and not on the hole." In memory of David Lynch, we will continue to explore the otherworldly and the unknown. We will focus not on the loss, but on what we gained from the years we shared this planet with you. We will see you in our dreams. So there we go.
Lovely.
You are listening to the Brum Picture Show on Brum Radio, and today we are paying tribute to the great David Lynch. And now we're just going to take a journey through his filmography, because there's no way we can possibly do the man justice in the short time that we have here. But, we're going to give it a bash. So, yes. Eraserhead we've discussed in detail on this show before. So if you go back to our psychedelic episode, there is lots of talk to listen to about that. So we won't spend too long on Eraserhead, but it is, my goodness, what a debut to just come out. Yeah, 1977. It spent 5 years making it, and he just comes out with this absolute masterpiece, like something that people had never seen before, really. It was like,
it's very much an experimental film. So if someone's never seen Eraserhead, and I know Lynch would be against this, but could you sum it up in some words?
Well, yes. Basically, it's about a man coming to terms with having a child, in a way.
But it's a lot more than that.
It's a lot more than that.
In the most surreal and bizarre. I mean, just some image. Well, what images then that you remember from the film? I mean, I remember someone cutting up a very tiny chicken.
Yeah, that
doesn't look really like a chicken.
Yeah, and it's moving.
And it's like, kind of oozing something, but it's like a puppet. It's weird.
Yeah, that's what I've written down as like the standout scene of Eraserhead is, there's this scene where he's just, going to dinner with his girlfriend's parents or whatever, and then it's just this strange little live chicken thing. And then, but that is why I think Eraserhead just instantly kind of sums him up, because it's not just some kind of abstract art house thing. It is, and just completely inaccessible. It is also really funny. in places, like in a really dark way, but it's just like, it is such a mission statement of a film, because it's like, here we go, we're gonna have this stark, surrealistic imagery, incredible sound design. He was all about the sound design, and he was always, that he was always very hands-on and was the sound mixer on most of his films, but also just this dark humor and underlying it. It establishes like so many of his motifs. His
films almost tip into camp sometimes. Certainly some of the performances, I mean, are quite out there, especially by the supporting characters. I think sometimes there's some characters that you're just like, where's that person come from? And I can see a sort of relationship almost with him and John Waters, even though they're very different filmmakers. But there's a weirdness to his films, but like I say, a sense of humour and absurdity, even in some of his darkest films and darkest moments. You kind of want to laugh sometimes because they're so over the top and weird. And I don't think that's an accident. I think it's kind of how he looked at things. I think he thought... maybe he didn't feel like an alien at all. I think in many ways he came across as very normal. I think he saw the world as an alien place and the people in it as very strange, and the things they did as weird, and kind of exposed that in his films.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just found this quote of his. He says, "Absurdity is what I like most in life, and there's a humour in struggling in ignorance. If you saw a man repeatedly running into a wall until he was a bloody pulp, after a while it would make you laugh because it becomes absurd." But I don't just find humour in unhappiness. I find it extremely heroic the way people forge on despite the despair they often feel. So yeah, there you go.
Says a lot about his films, I think.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, so Eraserhead like put him on the map. It's and
became a big hit on the midnight movie circuit. So wasn't necessarily a huge blockbuster hit, but it got a cult following and it got people's attention.
Absolutely. And one of the people whose attention it got was Mel Brooks.
Of all people, Mel
Brooks.
You know who Mel Brooks is?
Yep.
Producer of The Producers. And Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yeah.
So that gives you... And many other kind of
Young
silly...
Frankenstein, and of course Dracula Dead and Loving It.
So a perfect match for David Lynch and his surreal, bizarre world.
So yeah, somehow Mel Brooks wound up seeing Eraserhead and was just like, okay, this guy is a filmmaker, and managed to get David Lynch on board to do The Elephant Man. Apparently,
after seeing Eraserhead, Mel Brooks ran out, arms wide open, to give David a hug and said, "You are a madman. I love you. You're in." And he described Lynch as Jimmy Stewart from Mars, which I think is the perfect description.
Yeah. Isabella Rossellini described him like that as well. That is, a common description of David Lynch. But yeah, so The Elephant Man wound up happening, which Mel Brooks incidentally took his name off because he didn't want people to get the wrong idea. And then that was his mainstream break, I suppose. A lot of normal people will have seen The Elephant Man. They might not have seen any other of David Lynch's films, but The Elephant Man is the one.
It's like his prestige picture, isn't it? And I think he kind of got involved with it because he'd made Eraserhead and he was speaking to a friend and he said he wanted to direct a script that was already available. And he asked his friend, "Do you have anything?" And he says, "I've got 4. And so we went through, he said the first one, The Elephant Man, and that was it. And he said like an explosion went off in his brain because that's how he talks about like thoughts and ideas. And he just knew that, and he didn't hear the other 3 ideas because he was just in from that. And it does have some of his touches there. It's in black and white.
Yeah.
He did say he was an odd choice. It's a Victorian setting. He was from, suburban America. But he said once he got there to the place, he had this, I guess, a kind of vision as if he were in Victorian England. And he said after that he felt like he owned it, like he just got it.
It is a beautiful film, and as you said, there is still a lot of Lynch in there. Like it's all about the sound design. There's all this, the sound of steam and just this kind of ominous, just running under
incredibly
everything.
Atmospheric.
And then, so naturally, doing a beautiful prestige film, he then somehow went on to do Dune.
Well,
So-
the Elephant Man put him on the map, really, and I think he got a lot of awards attention for it. As we said, a prestige awardsy film, and I suppose Dune was the natural progression of a big budget sci-fi. I think Star Wars obviously had been out and was a massive hit. I think even before Dune, George Lucas spoke to David Lynch about directing Return of the Jedi,
Yep.
which your friend Skip would have loved to have seen.
Yeah, but he just couldn't get his head around the idea of a Wookiee.
Well,
So
I
it gave him a migraine, apparently.
I thought the Ewoks, his version of Ewoks would have been nightmarish.
Yeah.
But yes, he wasn't interested, but he kind of encouraged, he said, George, it's your vision, you should direct it. But, you know, sci-fi was in, it was the superheroes of its day. He'd been very successful. Why not give him a load of money and get him to adapt, presumably, up until then, unadaptable novel?
Yes, I'd say even beyond then, it was unadaptable because, yes, it's fair to say it was not the film that David Lynch wanted to make. There was a lot of studio interference and just generally the production just kind of got out of his hands. And it is genuinely considered a failure. But I think in many ways it is underrated.
I think it works up until a certain point where you can tell that they've just really heavily edited it to get it to a certain runtime.
Yeah.
When perhaps they should have, chopped it in half or whatever.
Yeah. And there's also quite an unusual amount of exposition in it, like for a David Lynch film, because for a man who doesn't like to explain things very much, Dune literally starts with a close-up of a woman doing her best to explain the plot of the film to you. And there's a lot of this kind of stuff in it.
But I have to say, in terms of its visuals, now I've not read the book, and I have heard it's not a extremely close adaptation. But I think the visuals are amazing, stunning. Like the set design, I think he helped with the set design. He was using like ceramics and all sorts of weird things in the set design. I think the character design, the costumes. Personally, I do really enjoy Denis Villeneuve's version, but I don't think it's anywhere near as imaginative or out there as Lynch's. And his images of the sandworms, this is pre-CGI, really.
Yeah.
Are quite amazing. So I think, it certainly has its merits, and it has something that Denis Villeneuve's film will never have. And what is that, Paul?
That is Patrick Stewart running into battle with a pug.
Exactly. What
a little pug dog. Exactly. And if that doesn't mean...
If that doesn't sell it to you, then I don't know what else
I think
will.
that alone is justification for the film's existence.
Exactly.
So yes, it's definitely flawed, and it's something that David Lynch regrets in many ways. As like he says, he's proud of most of his work except for Dune, and I think he's too harsh on it. But I think that's just because
it was so interfered with.
Yeah, it was just that wasn't his film by the end of it. And then they tried to do like an extra long TV edit of it, putting loads of stuff back in. But then he hated that so much he had them take his name off it, and
because he wasn't really involved in that.
Yeah, so it was compromised. But in many ways, if Dune hadn't been such an abject failure, then David Lynch's career wouldn't have gone the way that it went, because it was that at that moment he was just like, I am not letting anyone else take control of my film ever again. And then it was because of that we wound up with Blue Velvet, which I believe is maybe your favourite, Nadine.
It is my favourite, and I like it, and I think it's might be a good starting point to get into David Lynch, because it's not as bizarre as some of his later efforts.
Not quite.
There's still a narrative.
Yeah, there's a story.
There's a story and everything.
Yeah.
But it's not quite as straight as the straight story, shall we say. So there's a weirdness in there, but you can still get your head around it. You can still kind of follow it. Whereas I find some of his work is a bit beyond me, I have to say. But yeah, it's actually one of my favourite films, just generally. And I think part of that is the casting. I think Carl McLachlan is brilliant as Jeffrey Beaumont. And as we said, fair play to Lynch for casting him again after the massive flop of Dune. I believe he had a 3-picture deal with producer Dino De Laurentiis, and so was able to do this film with pretty much no interference by taking a cut in salary. And so by making this at a relatively low budget, he was given, full creative freedom. And it came about, the idea came to him in several different ways, one in which was the song Blue Velvet. And he said just listening to that gave him a certain mood and just a certain feeling, and that the basis of the film was sort of around just the feeling he got listening to that song. And I've actually listened to songs before and been inspired to create film ideas. And I think there's something in that. And it's not necessarily the lyrics of the song, but music is one of the few mainstream abstract art forms, and it can give you a feeling and suggest images to you. So I think that's a great way of, getting inspired. And also, it's based around a fantasy that he had, which is quite obvious if you watch the film. There's a certain point where you think, oh yeah. But the interesting thing about this fantasy that David Lynch had, he was sharing with his friend, was that, yes, he'd like to go into a woman's apartment and watch her undress, and you're thinking, yeah, okay. But then this is where it's only David Lynch would go off in this direction. And then somehow it involves a murder mystery or some kind of mystery that he ends up solving. And it's just like, okay, so it's not quite where I thought that'd be going. But what I do like about it, it does have this element that a lot of people are uncomfortable with to this day. This kind of, there's this psychosexual thing going on. There's a lot of BDSM, a lot of violence, sexual violence. But what I really like is how Isabella Rossellini's character of Dorothy really turns the tables on Jeffrey Beaumont. So I won't give any spoilers, but that scene, I really enjoy that because I do find that quite empowering. And she was very involved in the film. I think she really enjoyed making it. There are some uncomfortable scenes that I'm sure would have been difficult to film, but she had a lot of control in how she presented herself. I think she had the idea that she wanted to take her wig off at one point to show a private side to the character. There is this shocking nude scene in it, but she said she saw it in a kind of abstract term, almost as like a Francis Bacon painting rather than something sexual. I've just written some stuff down after a rewatch. This is my view on Jeffrey Beaumont, the main character.
Okay.
Pros and cons.
All right.
And I think Kyle MacLachlan is perfect casting because he has this dual quality of being extremely wholesome as David, or presenting himself as very wholesome, but then he always gets cast as these like creeps and these weirdos, and it's such a strange juxtaposition. But anyway, my pros and cons on Jeffrey Beaumont. Pros: he's a detective. He's real curious. He's a good kid. He's from the neighbourhood. He works out, has a cute earring, punches Frank in the face, and will buy you a nice meal. Cons: he's a pervert, might be hiding in your closet, involves you in his shenanigans, the chicken walk. I'm sorry, it's not cute, it's just weird. Cuckolds Mike, not a cool move. Might bring a naked woman on a date with you. Again, not a great move. He put his disease in her, and prefers Heineken to Pabst Blue Ribbon, which is obviously just insane. But yeah, so that's my summary of Blue Velvet. But what I think is great about the images in it, again, let's talk about the images rather than the story. Really stick in your head. The blue eyeshadow, the red lipstick that Isabella Rossellini wears, the way that their bodies are posed, the candle flickering in the wind, the absolutely insane, fake-looking robins.
It's real.
Is it?
According to David, yeah.
That's not what I've heard.
I believe it is taxidermied robin.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it looks fake.
It's still a real bird.
Okay. That's exactly what I was thinking, actually. When we were talking about weird performances he gets out of people, there's a moment near the end of this film. This isn't a spoiler for the story in any way, but there's a robin eating a bug.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey Beaumont's aunt, I believe she is, goes, "Ew, I'd never eat a bug." And it's just so out of nowhere and in no way in keeping with the rest of the film in any way. But there are other weird, absurd moments, like at the beginning of the film, a character collapses while he's watering the flowers. And there's a moment where the dog comes and is like drinking the water coming out of his hose, and this guy's, practically dying. And it's just quite comical, I think. And just like, what is going on? But it's so beautifully shot, amazing sound design, very creepy, very weird. And another fun fact, Dennis Hopper plays the character of Frank in it, and David's original idea was that he would be huffing helium throughout the film. He's the baddie in the film. And Dennis Hopper suggested that it be nitrous oxide, and he's doing it to get himself high, which they went with. But his mind was just blown that day. I don't know if I really would be interested in seeing that version.
Yeah.
If, like, every time he took, maybe someone's done an edit of that. Every time he takes
possible now.
takes
a huff of gas,
his voice just gets higher.
Pep's Blue Ribbon.
I don't know if the film, I don't know if that would make the film better or worse, but it's Dennis Hopper couldn't get his brain around. He's like, what a bizarre idea that was. Like, what a mad genius.
Oh man, absolutely. And Dennis Hopper himself a mad genius in many ways.
Yeah, and almost didn't get cast in the film because he had such a bad reputation.
Yeah.
But David said Dennis's manager rang him up and he said he's sober, he's clean, he's focused, he's just done a film with somebody, please talk to that director. And he said he was perfect for that role. And Dennis rang him up and actually said, I am Frank, which is, if you've seen the film, is quite a disturbing claim
not
to
a good
make.
thing.
Not something you should be proud of, but it works for the movie. And yeah, great cast. Laura Dern's in it, I think 18 years old, first film. She met David at Bob's Big Boys, I believe, doodling on a napkin. Kyle was making shapes in his ketchup. And she was like, yeah, I want to hang out with these two guys forever.
Yeah, rightfully so. Blue Velvet, as you say, a good entry point for a lot of people, I think. Dark
and disturbing, absurd, beautiful.
Just like David. And then, of course, after Blue Velvet, David went off and did Twin Peaks, which obviously a television show, but
so we won't get too into it.
We won't get too into it. And yeah, just if you haven't seen Twin Peaks, what are you doing with your life? Sort that out. It changed television forever. Without Twin Peaks, we wouldn't have the X-Files, we wouldn't have Sopranos and stuff like that. It was, it was the thing that made...
It'd be on HBO now, wouldn't it?
It was the thing that made television cinematic, and it was like one of the first things to, actually have a story that would continue from week to week. Because back in the day, it would just be like, oh, it's an hour-long episode, and move on to the next
story
thing.
Of the week. It was kind of like a soap opera, but a really weird soap opera.
And I think for me, Twin Peaks was my entry point to David Lynch, and I believe I watched it when I was a baby, because it came out in like 1990 when I was a wee baby. So I believe I watched it. So maybe that's the origin. That was the origin of my love for Lynch, is that I was getting indoctrinated by my parents from day one.
But it was a huge hit.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is the weird thing about not every one of his films has found success, but he's always been quite popular, which is strange considering the type of stuff he does.
Exactly. Considering how weird he is, he does have this strange mainstream appeal. But of course, like Dune in lots of ways, he wound up having some fallings out with producers. And it's, most people say season 2 of Twin Peaks, it does drop off a bit because David Lynch's involvement he just wasn't involved because they forced him to give away the mystery too soon, which was the golden goose, as he referred to it. But then I think there's still some absolute gold in season 2 of Twin Peaks, and then by the end of the season, it's just some of the best stuff.
I think didn't he come back and do the?
Yeah, he finished off. He came back and did the finale and everything, and some of the imagery in the finale is just some of Lynch's best stuff. So it's still worth watching season 2, for goodness sake. And then 1990. We have Wild at Heart, his first collaboration with Barry Gifford, a novelist. And I'd say Wild at Heart is possibly a good entry point as well in lots of ways, because in many ways it's his most fun. So it's kind of like it's a bit like Natural Born Killers in a way. It's like it's Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern going on this violent spree, but very much in love as they're doing it. And there's so much great stuff in Wild at Heart. There's just Nicolas Cage's performance for one. It's like it's odd that they didn't really work together again after that, because maybe they're just two kind of contrasting kind of weirdness. Like I just imagine them hanging out, and like they're both from different planets, but different planets to each other. Maybe, I don't know, but obviously
Lynch
Nicolas
is from
Cage,
Mars. Nicolas Cage is from Venus.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, he's just full Nicolas Cage in it, and I think David Lynch's love of Wizard of Oz is possibly most obvious in Wild at Heart. There's loads of Oz imagery in there.
That's one of his favourite films, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, it's got Willem Dafoe. And if anyone's going to be in a David Lynch, it's strange. You'd think he would again be a Lynch regular just because of his face alone. But yes, this is the only appearance in his filmography, but it's just so good. And Willem Dafoe is his absolute creepiest. So yeah, I really recommend Wild at Heart because it's actually quite straightforward in lots of ways. I mean, it's still weird and harrowing and violent and dark, but yeah, I don't know. It's a romp. It's in lots of ways.
Feels like a description you could only make about a David Lynch film.
Yeah, and then coming up after that, we have his return to Twin Peaks, or at least his first return to Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me. And oh my goodness, what a film. Because basically, obviously, Twin Peaks, it was this big phenomenon that then kind of jumped the shark in many people's opinions and had an ending that frustrated lots of people. And people were expecting Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me in 1992 to, maybe answer some questions or address them in some way. And David Lynch said no. So Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me famously starts with the image of a TV being smashed to pieces. And that is his mission statement for what Fire Walk with Me is. It's a prequel, which people didn't want because people didn't want to find out what happened before. They knew what happened before. They wanted to find out what happened afterwards. So it's just, so basically the first 45 minutes of it is a kind of semi-unrelated detective story with Kiefer Sutherland going around the place.
Okay.
and then it turns into the most harrowing depiction of the last days of Laura Palmer. And it is such hard work in so many ways. Like, it's just exactly not what people wanted for the most part. But I think it's fantastic. And it's just got it's got David Bowie turning up and trying to do a Southern accent. And it's just got these scenes, like the scene that the Pink Room is from, Angelo Badalamenti. It's just one of the best things you'll ever see. But of course, this is not television. So it is way more dark. It is way more violent. There's nudity and all that kind of stuff. And it's just astonishing. I thoroughly recommend Fire Walk with Me, as long as you have seen at least the first 2 seasons of Twin Peaks, because Nadine was saying to me earlier.
Yeah, I said it's a prequel. Can I just skip?
No, you cannot, because it gives away the mystery. I mean, it doesn't make much sense even if you have seen Twin Peaks, but not having seen Twin Peaks, that is just, you're going to ruin the TV show for yourself. And
well, I have since. This is a problem. I was watching Twin Peaks on Channel 5 many years ago as a teen and got into it, but this, I have a problem with TV because I don't know if they stopped showing it or if I just missed a few episodes or something, but I never got to the end of it.
Oh,
That's
right,
the point.
wow.
So I never got to the end of the mystery, even though I've heard spoilers. And I've tried to watch it again since, and again not got to the end. So it's like, maybe I can just skip that and go watch the movie, because I love movies.
Yeah.
But you're like, no, you got to watch the show first.
Well, yeah, just do it properly. You know, watch it all. Season 1, Season 2, Firewalk with Me, then The Return. So there we go. But then we have Lost Highway. Again, a collaboration with Barry Gifford. And this is possibly his most rocker film, because it's got Trent Reznor producing the soundtrack. Marilyn Manson turns up for a little bit in it. Smashing Pumpkins are in the soundtrack. And it's just great. And it's got Bill Pullman playing the saxophone and just wigging out with some mad jazz. And then he turns into someone else. And then Patricia Arquette's all there. And it's just a great film. And it's got possibly my favourite scene ever from a David Lynch film. And that is when Robert Blake is at his party. And he gets Bill Pullman to make a phone call to his house, because actually the man, Robert Blake, that he's talking to is in his house. So he's just staring at Robert Blake, calls the house, but then this man is talking to him, but he's there in front of him, but he's also on the phone in his house. And it's just so...
I can't even picture that in my head. So I feel like I need to watch it just to understand.
You definitely should. Because Lost Highway, it's full of all of Lynch's themes. It's, you know, doppelgangers, shifting identities, all that kind of stuff. It's got this kind of sleazy noir kind of undercurrent to it, which
a lot
I
of his
absolutely
films
love.
have that noir element. I feel Blue Velvet is a noir.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess he must have grew up on a lot of that kind of film. I don't know.
Yeah. Again, don't have time to do all these films justice. I'm just rattling through them here. But my goodness, I recommend Lost Highway. And incidentally, the brutalist concrete house from Lost Highway, David Lynch turned into his studio. So he'd have a house, and then he had another house down the road that you go and work in, apparently. So that's cool.
Yeah,
good
why
for
not?
him. And then in 1999, we have The Straight Story, which I want to focus on a little bit now, because I think it's a film that a lot of people overlook. And in fact, I think Nadine, you were saying, listing the films that you hadn't seen of David Lynch, and you're like, I won't bother with The Straight Story.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem like a very Lynchian prospect.
No, but it totally is, and I absolutely loved it. So yes, the thing is with The Straight Story, it is U-rated. It was released by Disney in the States, and is about a man going across the country on a lawnmower. So it doesn't scream David Lynch, but when you see it, you go, that makes a lot of sense. So a lot of people don't really consider it a canon David Lynch film, but yes, I will argue that it is. So it's based on the true story of Alvin Straight, and he travelled 300 miles on a lawnmower to see his dying brother. And so originally the story was picked up as a vehicle for Paul Newman, but then eventually the rights became available again and were picked up by David Lynch's once wife and frequent collaborator and editor, Mary Sweeney. And she wrote the script for it with her childhood friend, John Hodge. So it's not just a random director for hire kind of job, which is what some people might think about it. He did actually have quite an interest in the film, or at least once Mary Sweeney had written it, he did. And it's just, it has this real poignancy to it. Especially in the light of David's passing. So it stars Richard Farnsworth, who was actually dying of cancer at the time of making the film. And the character he plays, Alvin Straight, has emphysema. And it's about coming to terms with death and the life that he's lived, and it is utterly heartbreaking. So obviously David Lynch had emphysema, so it just takes on this whole new poignancy watching it now. But it's just absolutely beautiful, and it's still populated with all the kind of weird small town David Lynch characters. So we get some Lynch regulars. We get Everett McGill, who's Ed from Twin Peaks. He turns up as a lawnmower seller, and of course, and Harry Dean Stanton's there. And then we also have some newcomers. We have Sissy Spacek, who's an old friend of David Lynch, who helped finance Eraserhead. And yeah, it's a lovely film. So it is somewhat slow in that it's a film about a man traveling 5 miles an hour across the country. But in lots of ways, it's quite a tight film, and there's really lovely short scenes. And it reminds me of films like Into the Wild. It's just that kind of loose road movie kind of thing. And it's got the score from Angelo Badalamenti again, which is quite different to a lot of his work. There's, acoustic guitars and such in there, but it's still unmistakably Angelo. But yeah, the pace, the soundtrack, performances, everything. There's just great little moments again. Like there's this bit where you didn't need to have this bit in the film, but there's a bit where he first attempts to go off on his little journey. He goes out on this old lawnmower. It breaks down less than a mile out of town or something, and he has to come back and abort, and he just takes a shotgun and just fires it at his lawnmower, and it just explodes in a ball of flames. And then he goes and buys another lawnmower. And it's just like, you could so easily have not bothered with that bit of the film. It's like, no, we're gonna do this. I thoroughly recommend it, because I think a lot of people don't realize that it belongs in the same breath as his more revered works. They just kind of get put off by the U rating, although to be fair, nowadays it would be a PG because there's lots of smoking in it, and I don't think you can have that in the U nowadays.
Well, it's lovely that there's a Lynch you can watch with all the family.
Yeah,
the kids, grandma. Maybe you want to get your kids into Lynch. They're a bit young.
Yeah.
Start them with a straight story, indoctrinate them early. Maybe grandma doesn't want to watch Blue Velvet, but she might enjoy the straight story. So it's nice in a way.
That's the thing. That's the odd thing about a U rating. I don't know. I always kind of think a U just means it is for children. That's obviously not the case, because if you showed a 5-year-old this,
they'd be like, what
is this?
But it just means there's no violence or sexual content.
Exactly. But yes, it is fun for all the family. The straight story. And then just a couple of years later, we have Mulholland Drive.
I've got an issue with Mulholland Drive.
Yeah, we've discussed this in the past, I think.
I don't get it.
Yeah. And I said, you're not supposed to get it. Well,
interestingly, I watched Lynch's David Lean lecture today.
Yeah.
If you don't know, David Lean lecture is a lecture that filmmakers give for BAFTA. Mm-hmm. This was more of a conversation, and there's some great moments that you probably have seen that have gone viral. Yeah. Like when he said Eraserhead was his most spiritual film, to which... when he was asked to elaborate, he just said, no. But I bring it up because he was talking about people getting his films, and he said that, Sally could go and watch his film and she might not understand it, and she'll go out with Jim and Bob or whoever, and Jim will be like, oh, this is what it's about. And she'll go, no, it's not about that. He goes, because Sally inside knows what the film is about for her, even if she doesn't know that she knows it. And Jim knows what the film is for him. So it takes on a different meaning for everyone. And I do remember watching this and thinking it was about something, which I don't remember what I thought, but I just remember having a very strong feeling it was going to go to a certain place, or something was going to happen that would explain everything. Yeah. And then when the thing didn't happen that I was expecting, then I was disappointed. But I did think something was going to happen.
Well, that's the thing. I think originally... Because I think in lots of ways, Mulholland Drive is one of his most straightforward films. Yeah, it's a clear...
Would you like to elaborate?
No. But no. There is a clear mystery in there. You can easily pick out a narrative. It's just where the story goes then kind of makes you go, but then again, there's still a conventional reading of that. So you can say, all right, this part of the film is a dream. This is reality, and that's a very simplified reading of it. But then there's all these other things going on where you're like, well, okay, but if that's a dream, then what about this bit, and blah blah. But I think all that comes from the genesis of Mulholland Drive. At one point, they were going to be maybe not explained, but at least continued with, because basically Mulholland Drive started out as a 90-minute pilot for ABC, and it was going to be a TV show. So obviously the first like 90 minutes, even maybe 2 hours of the film, it's kind of setting up all these different through line stories and all this kind of stuff. And then some of these just never actually get followed up on in the film at all.
Which would make sense in a TV pilot.
Because ABC, they saw it and they were like, no. It's like, he got into all sorts of arguments with him. Like, he wanted to have a nice close-up of some dog poo, and they were like, you can't shoot dog poo, David. And he was like, why? So you just got all these things. So it never wound up being a show. And then it was just one of those things where David was just like, okay, well, then that's that. But then someone at Studio Canal was just like, do you want $4 million to go and finish Mulholland Drive? And he was like, okay. And then a year later, they went back and filmed the rest of the film. So originally it was going to be something completely different that would have kind of gone off in all these different directions and then maybe come to a conclusion, but let's face it probably wouldn't have. And then instead we wound up with this strange hodgepodge of a film. But for me, I think that's what's remarkable about it, that it went from a failed pilot to one of the greatest films of all time, in my opinion.
Well, now that you've explained it, it makes sense of how it turned out. But I will say, it's not just your opinion. Many critics have voted this the greatest film of the 21st century. And I think perhaps that's part of my problem with it. That's kind of compounded my dislike for it.
Right, yeah.
Is that it's supposed to be... What? I think it's beautiful. I think in terms of images, I'm sure there's some fantastic images in there. But I think it was just too... Like I said, I like Blue Velvet. It is weird. But there is basically a story there. And there are things that don't totally get explained or are wrapped up in a sort of vague way, but it comes to a conclusion, whereas this, it just lost me and I just didn't get it and just wasn't on board. I'll give you one example. There's a scene, a very famous scene, where they go to the car
diner.
park.
Yeah, oh yeah.
This guy's describing a dream that he had and how frightening it was, and they go to the car park and they see this image, I guess, straight out of his dream, this person. And loads of people I know describe this as being like incredibly frightening and like disturbing. And I just think it looks silly. I think it looks so silly and stupid. And I don't get it. But I heard something recently, and I can't for the life of me remember who it was, but two filmmakers were talking. And one said the reason why people's dreams sound so boring when they explain them is they're just telling you what happened. Whereas what makes a dream special is like the atmosphere and the feeling and the emotion attached to it. And we don't normally describe them. And I thought that makes so much sense, because I've had dreams that have been, just my dream last night was incredibly stressful. If I described it to you, it was basically me looking for a phone charger for about, I don't know how long. But in the dream, it was incredibly stressful. So, yeah, that kind of makes some sense to me, but wasn't for me. Didn't get it. Maybe I'll try and watch it again. I feel like I need to watch some kind of essay on it or something.
Yeah, or not,
it.
or just.
Well, I tried that and it didn't work.
Fair enough.
Just go with it.
It's funny because in the DVD release or the Blu-ray release, there's something that
like these clues.
Yeah,
or something.
10 clues, and I bet they made David Lynch right, and I bet half of them, or maybe all of them, mean it. So it's like, pay special attention to the lampshade, and then
my cousin did it. Yeah,
there are 2 clues before the opening credits or whatever. And,
my cousin did that, but she had a problem because I don't think you can pause the DVD when you watch the film, something like that.
Yeah.
So she had an issue. She was trying to follow the clues and everything, but, she had to do all the stuff and whatever. So she had to start the film over again, which just seems even more. It
took a while for David Lynch to get on board with, chapter selections in DVDs and stuff, because his view is just like, you can't chop a film up into, it's not a book. You can't chop it up into chapters. You can't do that. So, the early releases of things like Eraserhead, you couldn't skip or anything. You just put it in and then that was that.
That was it.
It's like, no. You got to watch the whole film or nothing.
No toilet break.
But for me, I don't know, because I rewatched Mulholland. That was the first thing I watched when I found out David had passed away. Is I was like, right, I'm putting on Mulholland Drive, because I'd not seen it in ages. And watching it again, I think in many ways it might be my favourite. Like, I just love it. And I think that's partly because it reminds me of The Return, Twin Peaks: The Return, the most. I feel like The Return is kind of finishing off Mulholland Drive in lots of ways.
So I've got to go and watch
tone of it.
The entirety of Twin Peaks season 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Then The Return.
Yeah.
then go and watch Mulholland Drive, and I can't pause it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. There we go. So that's your assignment. But yes, incredible that film came out of a failed pilot. That's why I love David Lynch so much. It's, and obviously launched Naomi Watts, etc., etc.
And Justin Theroux is in it as well.
Oh yeah, and Justin Theroux is in it, playing a film director. And funnily enough, Justin Theroux is also in Inland Empire.
Ooh.
So Inland Empire, yes. It is safe to say Inland Empire is David Lynch's least accessible film, I would say.
Okay.
I don't think you can really...
So if you've got Straight Story on one end,
and then we've got Inland Empire
on the other end.
Because I'll be honest, like, a lot of Inland Empire makes Eraserhead seem mainstream. Like, it's just like, it is hard work. And even like me as a David Lynch super fan, rewatching Inland Empire, some of it I was like, oh my God, this is difficult. It's nearly 3 hours long. And it came about through a chance encounter with Laura Dern. He was just walking down the road one day in Hollywood and just happened to run into Laura Dern, who hadn't seen for ages. And they were like, oh, we should do something. And then he started filming stuff with her. And so basically this was the reason David Lynch had so much freedom with Inland Empire is because David Lynch discovered digital video and realized that it doesn't cost very much. So whilst there's no one would ever have given David Lynch the money to make Inland Empire on celluloid, given him just a consumer grade digital video camera, he was allowed to do whatever he wanted. And what's funny about it is better digital cameras were available to him at the time, but he wanted it to look rubbish. And there's just something about it. Like, there is an ugliness to a lot of it. And it's just amazing. But yeah, it's just very, very strange film. Loads of it takes place so basically it follows Laura Dern around for a lot of the film. And she is an actress, maybe? No, she's an actress, but then she's also possibly about 6 other people, and she's either in the film or she's not in the film, or I don't know. There's long sequences that are just rabbits. People in rabbit costumes having out of sequence conversations, and that comes from David Lynch's sitcom. He had an internet sitcom called Rabbits, and he was just like, I'll just put that in the film. But it's also an important part of it. And Naomi Watts was actually Naomi Watts is the voice of one of the rabbits, and is actually in the rabbit costume, apparently, supposedly. So yeah, and then you've got suddenly Jeremy Irons is there, and it seems like a normal film for 5 minutes. Yeah, and Harry Dean turns up, and you're like, okay. And then it's got like Grace Zabriskie from Twin Peaks. But then there's there's all these bits, like there's a whole musical sequence set to Beck's Black Tambourine. There's choreography. There's all these just mad moments, and it's a baffling film, but it is experiential, and it seems like it is the film that is kind of really just doing what he wants to do, and that is just explore dream logic and
follow
David Lynch's brain.
Digital camera.
Yeah, exactly. And just, you should watch some of the behind the scenes footage of it. Is just great. And in fact, if you see any David Lynch on set, it's just great. So like the behind the scenes footage for Inland Empire and indeed like Twin Peaks: The Return, it is wonderful because whilst he's such a kind man, he does get angry at people. Like he's firm.
Definitely.
He's like, no, that is not acceptable. Just like getting annoyed at someone for being on the phone or whatever is just like, no. And it's just like getting annoyed at producers for, wanting to make a scene a bit shorter is just like, what the? Yeah. Even though he's lovely, I love that he never, because a lot of directors will kind of hide behind their ADs, their assistant directors, and they'll get them to do all the telling off. Like I remember watching the behind the scenes of From Dusk Till Dawn, and basically Robert Rodriguez is just communicating through his assistant director, and he's getting him to be an a-hole to everyone. But David, he's hands-on, and he'll tell you to your face like what's going on. So yeah, Inland Empire, I would say, not an entry point.
Okay.
For David Lynch, unless you want to, but in many ways,
unless you really want to blow your mind. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, go for it.
But no, it is incredible. It is incredible. But
do you want to mention his Oscar campaign for Laura Dern in that role?
Oh yes. He just sat on Hollywood Boulevard with a cow.
Of course.
Yeah.
And it went viral. He said
it did.
He said he wanted to campaign for her, but he didn't have the money for the trades, to put an ad in the trades. So like the magazines, the Hollywood magazines.
Yeah.
So he thought, but I love the way he explains it. So he had to As if this was the obvious and only choice. So I had to get a cow and sit outside with it with a sign saying, for your consideration.
It's amazing. But anyway, so that was his last film. All the way back in 2006. So 18 years ago, he kept working, and he was just always working on his art and all that kind of stuff. And then
his weather reports, yes, is on which of course were a big thing in COVID, but he was doing them before that as well. Random number selections.
Yeah. He was always keeping busy and always working away in his studio. And then people say Inland Empire is his last film, but the people who know that his real last film was Twin Peaks: The Return. Because if David Lynch says that's a film, that's good enough for me. And it is 18 hours of unadulterated Lynch. And for me personally, Twin Peaks: The Return is the best film ever made by anyone ever.
Okay, but it's a TV show.
No, it's a film if David says so.
Okay.
So there we go. But yes, there's so much more we could say about David Lynch's film career. But yes, it's time. I think that is a broad overview. I hope maybe some of those films you haven't seen before, and now you'll be like, oh, okay, I will watch that. I will watch The Straight Story. I will watch Dune. I will watch Inland Empire, even though I've just been told it's impenetrable. You are listening to the Brum Picture Show on Brum Radio, and today we have been talking about David Lynch. And now it's time for just some general quotes and anecdotes about David Lynch. Did you have one, Nadine?
I've got a Paul Schrader one. Nicholas Sarda, a film friend from Paris, wrote to tell me a story about David I'd forgotten. That Dino had asked Paul Schrader to read the Blue Velvet screenplay. You said you loved it and could not improve it. When you met Lynch during his prep, you asked him if the title Blue Velvet was a reference to Kenneth Anger's Scorpio Rising.
Oh, yes.
He told you he'd never seen it. You sent him a VHS tape of the film. A year later, you met Lynch at the premiere party of Blue Velvet in LA and asked him if he got the Scorpio Rising VHS. Oh, yes, Paul, I got it. Thank you. Did you watch it? Asked Paul Schrader. I did. And what did you think? Well, to be honest, I didn't like it at all, Paul. Oh, why? I don't know. I found it weird.
I love that.
So if it was too weird for David Lynch, then goodness knows how weird that film is. Yeah. I'm going to have to check it out.
Oh, it's just beautiful.
I wanted to also talk about some of David's favourites.
Mm-hmm.
Now, normally with filmmakers, we might talk about their favourite films,
mm-hmm.
but David didn't watch a lot of films. He watched The Wizard of Oz quite a lot. And I think you said It's a Wonderful Life
mm-hmm.
and a few others, but he wasn't the biggest film fan. He got a lot of his ideas, as we've said, from meditating and other things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But what he did have a ton of favourites is textures. So here's some of David's favourite textures.
Okay.
Well, skin is near the top.
Mm-hmm.
I love the textures of a factory. I love smoke in the sky, and I love oil in the dirt, and I like wire, and I like broken glass, and I like sweat and pistols. I like a little bit of blood and saliva on concrete. I don't know if that's mixed together or separate. I like cars and exhaust, and I don't know, a million different things. Teeth. It's not the only quote I have of David's about textures.
Mm-hmm.
He really liked his textures.
Yeah.
He said, I'm obsessed with textures. We're surrounded by so much vinyl that I find myself constantly in pursuit of other textures. One time I removed all the hair from a mouse with near hair just to see what it looked like, and it looked beautiful. I hope the mouse was dead. And again, I don't necessarily love rotting bodies, but there's a texture to a rotting body that is unbelievable. Have you ever seen a little rotted animal? I love looking at those things just as much as I like to look at a close-up of some tree bark or a small bug or a cup of coffee or a piece of pie. You're getting close, and the textures are wonderful. Well, I couldn't agree less with David on that. I absolutely hate the texture of pie. So, an interesting man.
Yes.
Weirdly, actually, his lists of textures remind me of a Japanese writer called Say Shunnigan. She's a medieval writer, and she wrote a pillow book or a sort of diary that became very famous. And she has lists of weird textures and things that she likes. I think one of her favourite textures was duck eggs or something. So I feel like they would have got along, perhaps. But yeah, why don't you write in, listeners, and tell us what your favourite textures are at pictureshow@brumradio.com.
Yes, please do.
Love to find out. That's actually quite a good date question. What's your favourite music? Bland, boring, obvious. What's your favourite texture? Tells you a lot about a person.
Yes.
They say it's a rotted mouse. Run.
A cat's tongue.
Really?
No, that's not my favourite.
I was going to say favourite.
That's the most texture I can think of.
It's not what's the most texture, Paul. It's what's your favourite texture.
There you go.
Trying to think of my favourite texture now. I'm a bit bland. I like, silky things. That's nice. I don't know about, bullets, pistols, and saliva.
No. And I bet one of David Lynch's other favourite textures was that of a Cheeto.
He loved his Cheetos.
He loves his Cheetos. So something about great American auteurs that love cheese-based snacks. Because obviously Clint Eastwood, big fan of Cheez-Its.
Hey, he loved cheese as well.
And he loved cheese.
Yeah, David Lynch loved cheese.
Yeah.
So,
There you go.
big fan. In fact, that's something I sent my daughter because she loves cheese as well. So we would have got along.
Who doesn't love cheese?
My cat loves cheese as well. Not that I give it to him regularly, but if he finds a bit on the floor, he goes at it.
I feel we've digressed.
Sorry. Any more fun Lynchian tales?
There's so many fun Lynchian tales. One tale I really like is him meeting John Hamm and Elizabeth Moss from Mad Men, but only referring to them by their character names, Peggy and Don.
He once rescued 5 woodpecker toys.
Oh, yes,
Woody
yes, this is
Woodpecker
wonderful.
toys, that he saw in a petrol station. He said, I screech on the brakes, I do a U-turn, go back and I buy them and I save their lives. He says, seriously, I named them Choco, Buster, Pete, Bob and Dan, and they were my boys and they were in my office. So he was an adult when this happened. And they were my dear friends for a while, but certain traits started coming out and they became not so nice. Looking straight ahead, he says with a grim finality, they are not in my life anymore.
I love that. Yeah, I saw a little bit of an interview and he's just talking with those woodpeckers on the couch next to him. But yeah, I really want to know, what were those strange traits that started coming out?
Well, he said they know that there is much suffering in the world. It took many years of small metal hanging hooks on Sunset Boulevard, but they tell me at the bottom of all, there is a constant happiness, and the more time I spend with them, I think it more. So that's nice. Nice to know.
That is nice to know.
And I do think David Lynch would have been quite intrigued by death. Feels like the ultimate meditation to me.
Indeed. On that note, let's finish things off with some inspirational words from David. And this came from, if you go on BBC Sounds at the moment, there's a beautiful, I think it was one of his last interviews, and there's a beautiful interview with him after the passing of Angelo Badalamenti, and it's just a great listen. Check it out. But there's a moment towards the end of that which is just absolutely heartbreaking, but also uplifting for this moment. And so the interviewer asked him, he noticed all the way through this conversation with David, he referred to Angelo Badalamenti in the present tense, and it's true, like throughout he is referring to Angelo in the present tense. And David responded with, you have to keep Angelo alive. I believe life is a continuum and that no one really dies. They just drop their physical body and we'll all meet again, like the song says. It's sad, but it's not devastating if you think like that. Otherwise, I don't see how anybody could ever, once they see someone die, that they'd just disappear forever, and that's what we're all bound to do. I'm sorry, but it just doesn't make any sense. It's a continuum, and we're all going to be fine at the end of the story. So yes, we could have spent hours talking about David Lynch. We hope that maybe some of you that aren't as big on David's work, that you're now going to dive into his oeuvre a little bit deeper. But yeah, a remarkable man. That is about it for this week's show. But we've just got time for a little roundup of Nadine's local events.
Yes, so we're going to be back in February, Screen B14. On the 10th of February, we'll be showing Memories of Murder at Mockingbird Cinema. On the 20th of February, we'll be showing Priscilla at the Cuban Embassy. So if you want to buy tickets to any of these events, do check out our links on our social media. So at Screen B14, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And we'll be showing Night on Earth on the 15th of March at the Heath Bookshop in Kings Heath. And on the 27th of March, we'll be showing Metropolis with a live score at the Hare and Hounds. And over a quarter of tickets are already sold for that. So do check out our socials at Screen B14 and be sure to join us at one of these events.
Yes, join us.
Join us.
Well, thanks for that, Nadine. Do be sure to join us next time. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from me, Paul.
It's goodbye from me, Nadine, and it's blue skies ahead.
Blue skies and golden sunshine all along the way. Goodbye, Mr. Lynch.
You have been listening to The Brum Picture Show, a Screen B14 production for Brum Radio. Tune in next time for more film fun, and don't forget to email us at pictureshow@brumradio.com. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Oh, dear. Okay.
Well, that's a nice tribute, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, I could have gone on for ages.
I know. I
There's
feel
so
like,
many more
I didn't even
quotes.
do Blue Velvet proper justice. But I feel like we did get a lot in there.
So it's just loads more. There was like him explaining to Trent Reznor about trying to describe a sound.
Go on,
No.
describe it for me.
Okay. And then we got one from Trent Reznor describing meeting with David Lynch. And he says, because obviously they worked on the Lost Highway soundtrack together. So Trent says, we set up a weekend for him to come to my place in New Orleans. At first, it was like the most high pressure situation ever. It was literally 1 minute, hi, I'm David Lynch. And he's cooler than I even imagined he would be. 3 minutes later, he's saying, well, let's go in the studio and get started. Then he'd describe a scene and say, here's what I want. Now there's a police car chasing Fred down the highway, and I want you to picture this. There's a box, okay? And in this box, there's snakes coming out, snakes whizzing past your face. So what I want is the sound of that. The snakes whizzing out of the box. But it's got to be like impending doom. And he hadn't brought any footage with him. He says, okay, go ahead. Give me that sound.
Is that not a reasonable request?
That's very reasonable. Oh man, and yes, you need to watch some of the just videos of Angelo Badalamenti talking about being directed by David Lynch and the way they composed Laura Palmer's theme tune and all that. There's just
I think one of my all-time favourite quotes is Lynch directing a woman, and he says, "You're like a doll, like a doll." Like a doll in a dream.
Yeah. And then another one is like, okay, let's do that again, but this time good. Straight.
Thank you for listening to this Brum Radio podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us on your podcast app.